I want to review a Saw movie. Like it or hate it, I must make my choice. Welcome to the Cinefanatics. My name is Robert Adams, and I am here today with a spoiler-free review for Saw X. And yeah, I just saw the premiere at Fantastic Fest 2023. There's a lot of good movies that have been playing at Fantastic Fest. If you want to know what I've been diving into, make sure you come follow us on all the social media, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at The Cinefanatics. You can follow me personally at Robert Adams MLP. While we're at it, make sure you hit that like button and comment down below what were your thoughts of any of these movies, your opinions. I want to know those as well, and please subscribe. As we jump into this, again, this is going to be spoiler free, so don't worry about anything. I'm not talking about anything that you haven't already seen or you weren't already aware of because of the trailers. I am a fan of the Saw franchise, whether it's the highs of it or the lows of it. I do like the Saw franchise. I'm a big fan of gore and the special effects of it, and the Saw franchise does deliver that in spades at some point. Obviously, again, it's been widely known that this movie does take place between Saw and Saw 2, and I think it does it very well. It nestles in a really nice time of space, and I like how they did that, while still keeping respect to everything else that has come before it, which is funny because, I mean, you've got like Friday the 13th and Halloween and the Nightmare on Elm Street series. Heaven forbid if we mess up consistency with this. So, yeah, big fan of this franchise going into this, and I love how they made this movie. It is kind of weird they didn't go back and like de-age Tobin Bell or Shawnee Smith for this movie, which I think is fine, but otherwise it is something that you notice throughout this movie. They didn't do the backwards hat trick that they did in Saw 3D with Tobin Bell, which I'm absolutely happy for because that just looked weird, but otherwise, yeah, I think it plays okay for this. Also, another thing, knowing that this movie is between Saw and Saw 2, you know that these characters are going to make it out of this movie because they have the rest of the franchise that they have to be in. So, given that, you would think that it might lower the stakes of this movie a little, and I actually found that to be one of the most interesting parts. Yes, there's not really any stakes in regards to Jigsaw or Amanda. Again, you know they lived through this movie, but what exactly is happening? Where do they put through? And throughout this movie, there's stuff that does happen, and you're wondering, cool, how are they going to get out of this situation? Or how is this going to turn out? And I love how they managed to wrap all that up. And the direction that they went with the story in regards to that was beautifully well done, and I had a lot of fun with it. Yes, this movie is gory and gooey and just exactly what you expect out of a Saw movie. It is kind of weird now that I've also become a fan of the Terrifier franchise, which I feel like is kind of like in the same like family as the Saw. It is another one of those that feels like it could like be in the slasher / torture porn type of situation. And while after watching especially Terrifier 2, I go back and watch a Saw movie and I'm like, well, this is kind of tame in comparison. But for those of you worried, the same kind of like gory kills that you expect from the Saw traps, they're still here in this movie. The fun thing about this movie though is the fact that they've basically twisted everything about the Saw movies in a different direction. Jigsaw, John Kramer here, is actually played as kind of an anti-hero. We've never really focused on Jigsaw, the character, even though there is a movie called Jigsaw, and the whole thing was about the lore of Jigsaw. This movie actually does put him front and center, and I like that. This is diving into more of his psyche, way he thinks, the way he talks, the way he acts, outside of what we've seen, like the snippets of, or like brief flashbacks in the previous Saw movies. For example, one of the things I really liked is when someone was nice and courteous to him, he actually like made a point saying, thank you for being nice, thank you for being courteous, thank you for being honest. Like he is a nice, normal guy in regards to that. But like he's still kind of a creepy person. I mean, let's be honest. They still are going with the tried and true. Jigsaw is not a serial killer. He doesn't kill anyone. Everyone just manages to kill themselves, and he puts them in the traps and yada yada yada, all that BS. And that still happens here. We're still talking about that, but he still like really sticks to his gun, saying that I'm not the one doing it. So it makes it for a fun situation, especially again, this movie taking place between Saw 1 and 2. It is John Kramer's going down to Mexico looking for this miracle treatment that could solve the cancer that's in his head. And throughout this, of course, you know that in the future Saw movies, he's still sick. So it leads again back to some interesting storytelling as to what exactly is going on here. You know that something's not right here, and because something isn't right, people are going to get punished for it. And that's exactly the setup for this movie. And that makes it fun and exciting, and I love how they approach that topic in this scenario. Adding something fun, adding something personal to John Kramer's plight throughout the Saw franchise. And yeah, it was just very well done. One of the other things I really liked about this movie is when compared to Spiral, the Chris Rock Saw movie, that movie was like in regular, normal, everyday color tone palette, while the Saw movies in general have been very dark and dirty and grimy, slightly like lightly greenish in hue, more on the cool side of the light spectrum instead of being like the red in your face. This returns us back to more of that cooler side, the greenish and blue hues, kind of a filter over everything. I like returning back to that world, even though, again, this movie takes place in Mexico, and typically it's very stereotypical of movies to just throw a giant orange or yellow, like, sepia filter over the lens or the screen whenever you're in Mexico, because that's how Mexico's got to look, apparently. And even though it may feel like they get that in some points, it is still back to that tried and true look of Saw, and I love that. Speaking of which, like, the first half of this movie is a lot of setup into what is actually happening in regards to this cure in Mexico, and I like it because it does take us away from your normal Saw storyline, which typically is we've got John Kramer or whoever the Saw apprentice of the week is setting up something, having to deal with their storyline, and then over here there's a storyline of randos that are put in a trap because they're just not appreciating their life. And we don't necessarily have that here. Again, we're following John Kramer. He's the lead character of this story. So we're watching his setup with everything in regards to this miracle cure in Mexico. And then it's about halfway through the movie where the whole movie just flips and then dives into a very normal Saw movie with people putting in traps and all kinds of blood, guts, and kills just flying all over the screen. And it gets very heavy. There is some logical leaps. My only real negative takeaway in this is some of the logical leaps in this. Of course, again, Amanda Shawnee Smith is in this movie, and again, this movie takes place in Mexico. So, of course, you gotta assume and know that at some point Amanda is joining John down in Mexico. But curious, so is Billy the Puppet riding his tricycle, which begs the question of how did they get Billy and his tricycle on a plane through customs and the TSA down into Mexico? It's a little weird, and there's other like little logic gaps like that I'm like, a lot of them are going to be spoilery, so I'm not going to say anything, but that was the one that as soon as I saw, I was like, how did Billy get here? That doesn't compute. That doesn't make sense. So it's not enough to take you out of the movie, but it is something like you're watching a Saw movie, you want to see Billy on his tricycle. I mean, let's just be honest, that's who we're really here for. Forget all this Amanda and Jigsaw stuff, give me the puppet. Otherwise, yeah, I think the storyline was good. Again, solid story, not messing with the continuity of the rest of the Saw franchise, at least from Saw 1 through Saw 3D. I don't feel like Jigsaw and Spiral are required viewing for this movie in particular. I would highly recommend at least go and sit through the original 7 movies, only because it gives you that perspective on John Kramer. The movie still had that influence even after the character of John Kramer and Jigsaw pass away throughout the franchise. You still get that perspective of what he means, what his life goal is, everything that he's doing as far as trying to rehabilitate people who don't appreciate their lives. You get that feeling even heavier if you had already watched at least those first 7 movies. So I would highly recommend that. But I mean, definitely there's going to be at least the first couple that deals primarily with John Kramer and Amanda that you would want to catch up on before watching this. Otherwise, yeah, I think this movie ranks pretty high in the franchise. I might do a ranking video of all of them at some point, and I'm not exactly sure where exactly this is going to land. I will be honest, it is going to rank higher than Jigsaw and Spiral for me. Just Jigsaw, I think, is probably the worst of the franchise. Spiral wasn't bad, but it just deviates from the main franchise a little too much for my liking, even though it still has some of the same ideas, same basic plot lines. And yeah, otherwise I feel like it fits in perfectly. So yeah, eager to see if they're going to continue with this. And I don't know what else they could do. Again, this movie was nestled perfectly story-wise between 1 and 2. I don't know if you can tempt fate and do that again without messing up the larger storyline and continuity of the entire franchise. But yeah, that's going to be my review for this. If I'm going to rate this out of 10, I'm going to easily give this probably a good solid 7. Like, I enjoyed this movie, but I mean, we're talking about in the wide swath of Saw movies, what's really going to constitute a great movie? We'll see. This may change in my opinion later on upon rewatch, because I can't wait to watch this movie again, especially once you see the ending. You want to go back and rewatch everything again and see how everything was set up leading to the conclusion of it. So I'm eager to rewatch this again at some point, and maybe I'll score it higher. Otherwise, like I said at the very beginning of this, make sure you come follow us. I am still at Fantastic Fest. Today was the penultimate day. Tomorrow is going to be the last day, and I've got screenings of Totally Killer tomorrow as well, so be on the lookout for that out of the theater reaction and review at some point. Make sure you follow us on all the social medias. We are at Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at The Cinefanatics. You can follow me personally on Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd at Robert Adams MLP. Also, youtube.com/Robert Adams MLP. Otherwise, thank you for watching this review, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.